we naturally, as human beings, do not like to give a lot of credit that we know something is just a click of a button. That's why we also like art, because we know it's hard. So we're making an assumption that when tools get there, that we're just going to stop pushing the ceiling. I always tell people, no, we're going to push the ceiling more.
All right, so Nico, first thing I want to ask you is about your background, because, I was trying to research you and I kept finding one little line in an article saying that you actually were a visual effects artist before you co-founded Wonder Dynamics, which was acquired by Autodesk. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, and then specifically, what was it while you were a visual effects artist that inspired you to do this next thing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was a compositor first. I did kind of typical journey into becoming a compositor. Did some motion graphics. You do concept art, motion graphics, and then compositing. I've really worked on advertising a lot in indie films. I did some big studio films as well, but mostly around indie and advertising. I was always frustrated with, especially in indie filmmaking. I got into visual effects because I wanted to direct my own films, and I was really fascinated always with stories, usually sci-fi stories that dealt with future or predicting what the future is going to look like. And unfortunately, a lot of indie films, you just can't afford a lot of visual effects.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always my frustration. I've been on set of a lot of films where even down to roto or green screen, you just don't have a budget for it. So that's really kind of how the inspiration started. And I also wanted to tell my own story, so we started looking at technology. Me and Ty, my co-founder, started looking at technology. How do we make these lower budgeted films that do have a lot of CGI, because we do want to tell stories. One of the first scripts we were writing was about near future, where we kind of live with robotics. This was years ago. That's really kind of what it jump started our deep research into how do we cut the cost of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you were a compositor, were you using Nuke and kind of in a big pipeline, or were you using After Effects? I love the story of Everything Everywhere All at Once. They did a lot of the VFX and After Effects. Kind of a lot of those effects were done really kind of like 2.5D. Or
Right.
what kind of effects were you working on?
Yeah, I was obviously started at After Effects like everybody, and then I switched to Nuke. For me personally, I was a part of smaller kind of freelance work where it's a team of 5 to 10, and then I was part of big pipelines as well. I like smaller teams. I enjoyed those, like the troubleshooting you can do. I started learning visual effects and After Effects when I was 12 years old, watching Video
Oh, wow.
Copilot, Andrew Kramer, if you remember. That's really how I got into it.
I just hung out with him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a great guy. To me, that's why these tools and people that post these educational videos, this is early days of the internet. So I always find that fascinating. And then the more you go into in your career, you realize we're in an industry where people are mostly self-taught, which, when you talk to someone who's not from our industry, they're always very fascinated by it. And they think oh, wow, you learned yourself. But then you explain to them, no, actually, majority of people do. And they're still learning. That's the beauty of our industry. Is I used to work at this small boutique studio called Brickyard Visual Effects, and
In Boston.
when I was in college, there's Boston. There was LA office.
I've worked with them too. That's so funny.
Oh, really?
I know. I used to hang out with Dave Waller. There you go.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Steve Michaels were around that one. I was still in school, so I was interning, and then they got me my first feature credits after once I was finishing school. But there was a VFX supervisor, Mandy. I remember everybody that was a part of there would get Mike Seymour's FX PhD login, and that was expensive. And you were in school, so I was as an intern, they give you that login. You're so happy. You're like, oh my god, this is for a college student, everything's expensive. So you were learning, but one of the VFX supervisor, Mandy, I asked her about it, and she said, yeah, she's had 20 years of experience. She said, I still need to learn and watch this weekly. Because she's like, we're in the industry. If I don't learn and if I don't progress in my knowledge, I'll be left behind, because the tools are changing quickly. And obviously, this is before AI. So that mindset in VFX industry has always been. I always loved that mindset of okay, technology is moving fast. We have to keep up, but it's just a tool at the end of the day, and you just constantly need to find these sources.
Yeah, that's so funny. So yeah, so the first part of my career was spent in Boston, and we used to finish spots at Brickyard,
Oh,
and
nice.
then yeah, and then I think it was a few years later, someone left Brickyard and they started Zero VFX, which is also in Boston, and I ran a studio there for years, and so we used to hire compositors that were working, like freelancers that worked with Zero when we needed like really good roto or match
Right.
moving and stuff like that. And I heard stories. So my experience, just for your reference, is like pretty much all advertising. So when I was doing visual effects, and I did quite a bit, but it was always After Effects. Maybe I did use Nuke, and I learned it on FX PhD. But I never worked in a big pipeline. It was maybe there'd be three people working on a project,
Right.
passing
Right.
stuff back and forth, maybe a 3D artist giving us stuff. But the Zero VFX guys would tell us, there was a film that was shot in Massachusetts with Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock. I can't remember the name of it, The Proposal, maybe something like that. But one of the guys that was a compositor there, he was telling me they would literally have to hand paint individual frames of hair to like get the mats just right, because they'd pass in front of a tree and you'd notice. And I never had to deal with that level of detail. So one of the questions I had for you was why. I mean, I think in some way it's obvious, but I think there's probably not obvious things about it. Why is visual effects so expensive? Like, if you want to have a movie with robots in it, and our audience is fairly technical, so you can get into the weeds, but like, why does that cost so much?
It's mostly time, how much time you need. It's a frame by frame industry. There's a lot of iterations that, you can never really calculate. Sometimes, you obviously, I've been on projects where you go in and you have a limit of iterations. You're like, all right, I'll do it, but you can only give me 4 notes back, right? Or 4 iterations of notes, right? That's if you're lucky. Usually you don't have this negotiation power. But I'd say time. I think the way we always approached it, CGI is really expensive. Obviously, compositing is much quicker. But I think you know there are so many specialized steps. An animator will be good at animation. A rigger is going to do rigging. A texture artist is going to do texturing. So there's so many of these steps you have to do in parallel. We were even creating a character sometimes takes up to a year just to get a concept. I've been on films where you're in production, you're shooting, and the design of the lead CG character is not finished yet because they're
Oh
like
wow.
spending a year and a half of designing it. So I think partially it's creative process, nature of it, but I think bigger part of it is just the limitations of the tools. I think limitations of the tools. Sometimes we forget that we invented these tools, and that's not like a final destination of a tool, But there's so many times you were working on something and it's really preventing you. Like yourself, you mentioned After Effects, and you can get a job that you will never complete in After Effects. It doesn't matter if you have 2 years, right? You might do it in Nuke in a month, right? So I've done jobs like that where you had certain tools you used, and you're like, no way, I can't do this tool. It's just going to be too long. Um, so I think that's really why the cost is. You need a lot of specialized roles. You need a lot of time. But time to me is the main factor.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that, so everyone listening, in case you don't know, your co-founder is Ty Sheridan, pretty well-known Hollywood actor, the star of Ready Player One. And I noticed before the Autodesk acquisition, you actually had an advisory board that featured Steven Spielberg. And one of the things you mentioned was that, when you're making indie films and you want to have like a small team so you can make something cool, it's really hard to raise money for that. Well, it's probably not very hard for Steven Spielberg to raise money. So I'm curious, like, why someone like him was interested in helping you guys early in Wonder
Yeah,
Dynamics.
not for selfish reasons. I think a lot of great filmmakers. Joe Russo is on our board. Was on our board as well. If you look at, there's an interview I really like with. I think it was during the filming of Apocalypse Now. Basically the director was saying like, this democratization of storytelling has been an idea of these great directors for decades. And usually that's what technology has driven it. It's not just you hear Cameron also talk about it, why he's a believer in AI, because it's too long, it takes too long to create. To me, it's always like you have a vision, you write it down on paper, but then you have to spend 3 years to 5 years to get this vision out on the screen, right? And so the process is very, very slow. And sometimes that, there's always sacrifice between what you can imagine to what you can actually put on screen, on the side. So, I think that's how I see it. I see these, great filmmakers they don't need to prove anything, right? They don't in that way, but I do think they all care about storytelling, and they all care about making storytelling more affordable for people, because it is too expensive. Our business model of our industry is really broken, which we've seen in past 2 3 years. It just doesn't work. You're spending years in making something, hoping it's going to do well that weekend, right? Or now, obviously, with streaming, but even the upside of streaming has went down. So it's been the hardest than ever to get indie films greenlit. Like the past 3 to 5 years, the indie industry has struggled the most that I've seen. And talking to people that have been in it for 50 plus years, they say it's never been this bad. So I think this technology kind of revolution that's coming, it's really a necessity. It's obviously an unfortunate combination because we're dealing with multiple changes at the same time, and obviously, with strikes and everything that's going on. But I do think we need to figure out how to bring down the cost of making films. It just doesn't scale.
Yeah, I want to touch on that a minute because that's kind of interesting. I mean, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so, what is it about the business model that's broken? I mean, I think like our audience, they all love movies and probably are equally frustrated that most big tentpole movies cost $250 million to make,
Right.
and then another
Right.
$250 million to market. And so there's just, as a movie studio, I assume you're like, well, we need to make sure that like there's some recognizable character in it. Why is it that it's so hard for a really beautiful, well-made $15 million movie to get released and make its money back and making the investors money?
There's been a change in the business model. So it used to be, before streamers, it used to be that you have something called pre-sales. So you would package a film, you get a script, you would get an actor attached and director, and then you would get almost a half of your budget going to international markets, usually Europe. And you would say, hey, Germany or France, I'm making this movie. Can you give me this much money, which is, let's say, 10% of my budget? And once the movie is done, you get it, and whatever you make on that movie stays yours. I don't take any profit shares. So this is this pre-sales. And then on top of that, you used to have DVDs, right? So
Yeah.
filmmakers could rely on a lot of things, right? Usually they would get a pretty good pre-sale deal. And so you would get about 50% of your budget before you even start shooting. And then you would go to investors and be like, hey, I already have 50% on pre-sale. I got this actor attack, this director. Can you get the rest of the budget, or go to the studio? So that model worked really well for indie films. With once the streamers arrived, that model really changed. So you don't have pre-sale as much anymore because theaters are not doing as well. Majority of it is going streaming, and the streaming companies, their models are very different. They're either going to buy original film or greenlight it even before the development. But we kind of went to the old model of like back in the 60s, when producers would get about 20% on top of what they're getting paid plus 20% of that. So it really wasn't like, there's no profit share really now with the streamers, right? You probably remember kind of some of the big films and shows that happen that you kind of director doesn't really see any of that success of it, right, on the side. So that's what obviously a big reason for strikes was, that alongside the AI thing. But it's changed. So the business model changed. So the indie films are really, really hard to get funded right now. And as you said, I always say studios know how to make art films, but it's just very risky for them to make a $200 million art film because it's just not that many people will go see it. And that's why they have to make movies for the masses. But it's interesting. I see kind of industry changing right now. I do believe the theaters are coming back. I think a lot of studios realize they're good at it. They're good at making big films for theaters. They're not necessarily that great at competing with Netflix of the world. So, we're seeing that going back. A year ago, someone told me, oh, no, theaters will come back. Studios are going to go back to like 4 or 5 big films a year, recognizable IP, etc. And I was like, I don't know, like everybody's watching, everybody's all about streaming, but I see it now actually happening. So we've seen it with Minecraft success, and hopefully, like, we'll see how the new Superman does, etc. Things like that. But what really excites me, why I got into space, was, if we do bring this cost down, it's going to be much because think about it. How many people do you know that ended up getting their project greenlit as a first-time director? Right? Not that many.
Right.
It's hard. It's very hard. And then how many directors do you know that ended up getting $100 or $200 million films? like a
Right.
sci-fi or something. It's very, very, it's very, a very handful of people are fortunate to be in that position. So to me, like, I'm a little bit naive when it comes to this, but honestly, I'm a big believer like storytelling should not be that gate kept. It should not be tied to, social kind of economic status, and where are you in the world, etc. So I do think storytelling is too important to be tied with that. So
Yeah.
that's where technology to me is of just means to an end. It shouldn't be driving it, but it should be a means to an end.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the music industry. So I'm a musician. I'm really big into music, and the old model there was if you're a band, recording is super expensive. So you need a record label to like give you permission and give you money and all of that. And then all of a sudden, MP3 sort of broke that, and along comes this new technology, digital recording in your house and drum samples and stuff like that. And so now that there's a totally different model there, right? And I can kind of imagine a world where with the right technology, you could have someone with no budget, a Robert Rodriguez, but like the younger version, just getting clever with maybe tools like Flow Studio.
And doesn't have to give blood, right? That's what he used to do, right? He used
Yeah.
to, incredible guy. I was fortunate to meet him a few times. I mean, incredible what he did. He still like loves, the smaller stuff and smaller set and indie and things like that. I think, um, no, I think it's really important. So,
Yeah. Well, and the thing about him so I've been listening to, he's been on like a podcast tour lately. So I've been listening to a lot of interviews. He is amazing. He's such an inspiring guy. But one of the things that he says that is it's kind of like the opposite of what most people say, especially I think in the film world, is he does everything. So he writes, he directs, he's the DP, he can run sound, he knows how every light works. He edits his own stuff. He does some visual effects.
he does steady. He does steady. I think I read somewhere that he also does steady cam.
Yeah, he took a Steadicam class apparently.
Yeah.
And I think that especially now, and this is kind of like a broader conversation about like the way companies are being built now, smaller, using a lot of AI to kind of like not need as many people. It does, I think that this is kind of my take on it, is it does let the person with the vision be closer to it from beginning to end, versus if you're trying to direct an Avengers movie, you have a vision, you're the director, but there's 400 people between you and that final thing, right? And if you can decrease that to like 20 people or 50 people and make the budget 10 times smaller, I think that's awesome. So you started Wonder Dynamics, which is now called Flow Studio. So
Wonder Dynamics, is still called Wonder Dynamics. The product was Wonder Studio that we rebranded.
Got it. Okay, so
Flow Studio, yeah. Wonder Dynamics is still a brand, yeah. So we're still remain Wonder Dynamics as we were before. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, cool. So Autodesk let you keep that. So, but you started it in 2017. That was a lot earlier than I realized. That was way before AI was on my radar and probably most of our listeners. So what was the vision that you had then? Was it like what you have now, or did something change? Yeah.
Yeah, 2016 we started, and we started a little bit more of interactive things. It was kind of early there of VR, etc. And then Ty and I got this idea. Let's do every kind of tech idea we had started with the show idea or a film idea, right? So we had an idea where like, what if we make like a murder mystery, a courtroom drama, where you can go and explore scenes kind of in 360, right? But you don't need a headset. And then we started digging, and then we partnered with this other company, and we realized there's this is before ChatGPT. It was a conversational AI, so you had a digital double. You can have a conversation. So we said, what if we do a show, kind of courtroom drama, where you can switch from an actor into digital double that you can talk to, ask questions, and that would like branch the narrative. And that's really how we like discovered, AI. We called it visual AI at the time. There were no term generative AI. This is about 2018. Then we pivoted. Then we're like, all right, we did a pivot because we're like, this is bigger than us. No, we did a pivot because we were like, this is future of filmmaking. Let's learn what the future. Worst thing can happen, we'll learn ahead of other people how to make films using these new technologies. And that's when we were doing that, started writing that project about robotics, right? Kind of living in a near future with robotics and every day. And as we started building, we realized, okay, this is something that's quite bigger than us. So let's focus on the platform technology. We'll make our movies later. So really, that's how it started. But I think we were lucky that we stumbled upon it early. Both Ty and I kind of started researching and looking into self-driving cars and robotics and computer vision and all this technology. And there's so many things in VFX that we used already for machine learning side and computer vision. So it's base of that technology is very similar on the side. So and at the end of the day, it's all about understanding what's going on in your shot. The better you understand it, the quicker you can be at it. So yeah, that's how we knew it's not going to be something we can build in 6 months. So we stayed in stealth mode. We bootstrapped for first 3 years. Didn't take any salary out. I had a weekend gig. I was doing weekend job while I was we were starting a company. So kind of typical startup, startup experience.
Yeah. So I think this might be a good place to talk about kind of the vision for this and how it ties in with artists because um like you guys I certainly the more I've learned about your company the less fair it is, but you kind of get lumped in with the other AI companies that are working on visuals, but you guys operate very differently. And so just to kind of give you an opportunity, I guess, to differentiate, your co-founder Ty, he's an actor, right? And there's a lot of companies out there, like the Runways and the VOs and stuff like that, where they're trying to fully generate from text in most cases, performances and make influencer videos where no human was involved and stuff like that. And my intuition was, well, if I'm an actor, that would scare the heck out of me, and like I wouldn't want that. So how do you guys see yourselves versus some of these other companies and how they're operating in the tech they're building?
Yeah. So I think there's obviously a lot of kind of AI video solutions out there. Well, and that's all about generated, you say, like no actors involved, etc. We were more looking at it from a standpoint of how do I accelerate the pipeline. I was a big believer, working in visual effects. I was a big believer that this AI hype is going to be hype for a while, and there was this wrong hype and belief that it's going to replace entire pipeline overnight. And I think that comes from people that don't understand CG and VFX pipeline. They're a complex pipeline for a reason. There are certain elements we can replace and make better, but there's certain elements that exist because very smart people for the past 20, 30 years have been building these tools based on their experience working on the films. So that's one thing. So my belief was, okay, AI will come there, but it's going to be addition, and it's not going to be one tool that replaces the entire pipeline. So we said, how do we build it so I can actually get the data out to plug into existing pipelines in the language and these softwares that artists are used to. The other reason why we went that way, so in Flow Studio, essentially we have about 25 ML models that are tracking everything from your body to facial performance to lighting to camera track, a bunch of other stuff, and then extract your plate, your 2D video into 3D element, and then basically gives you that CG character. You can replace the environment, but it gives you in a software of your choice, whether it's Blender, Maya, etc., with all the data that you need to push your shot. The reason we built it this way is I knew that AI is going to struggle with editability element. So when we started, we saw, okay, if I get something that's about 80% there, but it's a black box that I cannot edit, that's not usable for me as an artist. So I knew that this period is going to come. Even 2018, when we started, we were trying to be realistic and say, one part is ethical, which is how do I build it where the artist still creates a character, artist still shoots the shot, the artist is still performing as an actor. That's where we're picking up. But the other one is kind of more just realistic. Let's take ethical aside. The other one is just more realistic because can I prompt emotions? I can't prompt emotions. I have to
Right.
perform emotions. I can describe your reaction. I can describe, I can copy a lot of things. But to me, like every actor has a different, artistic choice they're going to make. They have a different a talent that they bring in, right? So we want to pick that up. Same when you're shooting a shot, right? Same when you're lighting a shot. So for us, it was important to keep that movie magic. So we said let's have that be the driver. So, and I'm a big believer in multimodality. So you're gonna be able to drive some things with prompts 100%, but some things you still need a keyframe. Some things you're gonna need to drive with a video. So that multimodal, I'm seeing it more and more. But the difference between what we were doing is and what I've seen other companies, I always describe it like this: a lot of researchers that are building AI video, they're building it for social media, which makes sense. That's where the most financial gain is because you have billions of people versus our industry is quite small, right, compared to that. But the other reason is they come from a research standpoint, so they don't really understand film language. So, for instance, you're going to generate a video, and then what happens? Okay, I got to figure out to move a camera. But how do I move a camera? Well, I got to visualize that camera. I can prompt it, but that's not really enough because your feedback from directors sometimes going to be like, you've been in projects where you're like,
Yeah.
you get 10 notes back, 10 iterations, and then 11 they change their mind. They're like, actually change this light here, and or let's redesign this, so the manipulation needed is very editability, it's very to the final pixel. So I think what we're seeing with this AI video solution is they're now learning film language. Like they got that first kind of generating, but now it's all about editability. So how do I edit animation? Oh, I need a rig. What's a rig? How do I do that? How do I build it? So we're kind of like merging these two. We went with a bottoms up approach. We were like, let's build a foundation so we can understand the shot. Until AI gets there, let's work with existing tools that can perfect. And that's Maya, that's Unreal, that's Nuke, etc. So we went with the approach of like, let's give you editable data out that you can use in these tools until AI gets there that I can actually edit everything. But if we're being realistic, no AI tool out there right now can give you full editability. There just doesn't exist.
Yeah, we were talking before this, and I was mentioning that I spoke with Naeem from Moon Valley, and I brought up that opening shot from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where it's like this, kind of epic, legendary shot before you see the shadow of Indy putting the hat on it. It's amazing. And trying to prompt that and getting all of those pieces, it's kind of inconceivable to me that that's even possible with the technology we have. So I love the idea that like what you're trying to do is use AI. And actually, let me, as an aside, do you like that term AI? Do you think that's an appropriate term for what it is we're talking about here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we get turned into generative AI. We do, but we're more like kind of a solution that we're not generating as much as we're accelerating. So AI is fine, but people, it's hard to educate people sometimes, right? So you'll end up in a group somewhere, and we did have like great like certain reporters that reach out to us during strike that really understood what we're doing. And they understood that what we're doing is not really what the strike's about. We're actually doing something that's like using it ethically in the right way. But that takes a journalist that'll go in and dig deep and understand it, right? Actually, Time Magazine did a piece, and this Andrew, this reporter, really like understood. He used our tool, but it's hard, right? You need time for those things. So
yeah. So you mentioned that you have 25 ML models. Okay, so let's like help everybody understand. So where does Flow Studio fit in? Like, what are the tasks that it's making much easier that before maybe you'd have to, I assume Roto is probably in there somewhere, but like what like in a nutshell, sort of how does it, fit in there?
Yeah. So first big one is mockup. So you don't need a mockup suit. You don't need sensors. It's markless mockup just out of a video, and it gets your body performance and facial performance. Second one is camera track. This is all driven for character animation, and compositing, lighting and compositing a character. So the idea is, can I get you automatically 70-80% there? And then you can go in tools like Maya and Blender and tweak what didn't work with AI, right? And so we give you passes like mocap pass, which is your animation data, your camera track. We give you a point cloud. We give you alpha mask for your roto, depth pass, and things like this. So the idea is like, can I give you all the elements you're used to that your animator, compositor, etc. have, and obviously you get a rigged character, and then you can go kind of tweak and edit. So we try to bundle kind of like the whole pipeline in that little one processing that's easy 3-step process that gives you all the kind of files, and then in a nutshell, it really takes a video and turns it into a 3D. So it takes your video and turns it into a 3D file that has all those elements separated. It has your character, your animation, your camera track, your environments ready to go in that software that you like.
Got it. Okay, so it gives you a 3D representation of your scene, whatever you shot with a point cloud. That's pretty common. I know it can also generate clean plates automatically,
Yes.
So that helps with compositing. Motion capture data that can then be retargeted to whatever rig you need. And is it also like figuring out maybe like an HDRI or something, like this is what the lights were like in that?
It does lighting and compositing as well, so it gives you that pass as well in your 3D software. So you already have a light set up in that scene, right? That you can then play around with it. We're also working on enabling people to like upload their own camera track and or HDR, etc. Because a lot of artists will reach out to us and be like, "Hey, I already have this on set. Can I push this?" And we always tell them like, "Yeah, just add it in that DCC file that you're working in, but we're going to enable it more like as an input as well to help with the estimation."
Yeah. So when you guys have like fully built this out, at least where your vision is at now, like how far does this go? Is it really designed for CG characters in real shots, or could it also be real characters in CG environments, or CG characters that look photorealistic and their facial performance was captured perfectly and all that. Like, what's kind of the end game that you're aiming at?
Yeah, we started with live action, and then we got animation use case we launched recently. So it's also not just the character but the environment that you can replace. Really, the long term vision has always been with kind of that holistic editability approach. The live action and animation, even though that's obviously the main goals of the tool, what we've been building is something internally we call scene understanding, which is how do I build all these models so when the models get better, I can easily replace them. Can I drive? Can I estimate my camera from a source? Can I prompt my camera? Can I prompt my animation or estimate it with source and then kind of kit bash the thing? So we really want to make a tool that I see long term is going to be that perfect combination of different AI models that you can combine, but in 3D space. We're big believers in 3D space. I'm a big believer you need to stay in 3D space because the limitations of AI video is I don't have a visual representation of that, what I'm
Right.
looking at. So I can't move a camera in a 3D visual representation, which I really need. So that's why that biggest issue with AI video right now is spatial continuity, because these data sets that are being trained on don't have spatial continuity because they're mostly 2D video. So we've been doing synthetic data set since 2018, and we're making some major progress recently on kind of that world building on the data set. So that really the long-term vision for us is scene understanding, because then I can really control every single element. And I'm a big believer in separation of elements. Like, how do I separate the character from the environment, from the camera, from all that, right? Right now in AI video, that's still generated by noise at the end of the day. Yes, there's amazing understanding through LLMs, but I'm still a big believer it needs to be in 3D for it to really work.
Yeah, I've heard that from other people too. That's a big limitation. Now, does that come down to basically the training sets? Like theoretically, if you had, you know, a trillion examples of camera dollies, on black and white footage, maybe then you don't need the 3D representation. But when you're like coming up with something new, is that really why you need it?
So I would say I would separate it two. So one is the data set limitation with what you're feeding your model. You probably heard the term of, like, sorry my language, like crap in, crap out, right? Whatever
Yeah.
data set, how bad it
Yeah.
is, that's how you're going to get it out. But it's also a UX thing for me. So I don't think anybody figured out UX and UI for AI generative AI tool when it gets there. We're still like in the midst of these kind of discovery phases, um, and that's where I'm more a big believer in 3D, because I do need to visualize it in that space and I need to control. That's how we do it on set. You come on set. You're saying you go, okay, you block out your actors based on this, right, etc. It's very hard to do that in 2D space. That's why we have compositing versus you know uh, 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 animation and CG on the side. So I think that's one. But yes, I think a lot of early AI video models we've seen, they are mostly built on scraped internet data, and it's mostly images and videos, mostly images, because that's another problem. A lot of them don't have a kind of temporal component. So it's based on kind of image frame. So a lot of them early on didn't have that temporal component, which they do now. Uh, um, and so I think every company early on kind of figured out, like, okay, this is a big limitation, because I don't, like, if I have a 3D object and I see a bunch of images of something, and my model never sees the backside of it, it will hallucinate that backside, right? So that's why that data is important. But also the other reason 3D data is important is something called ground truth. Videos do not give you complete precise. It's estimating. You're using computer vision a lot to estimate how far is this person from the camera, what lens it's used, how many feet did they walk, right? Things like that. You can estimate all that, but it's not 100% correct. That's why the beauty of synthetic data is because you get ground truth. You get ground truth. 100% every single, like, even if you're using it for your depth or your clean plate or your camera estimation, 100% what the distance is. 100% where the lines of pixel are. So you really get correct math, right? Everything else is not a correct math because you're kind of guessing based on some computer vision tools that you can estimate these things from. As a synthetic data is so important, but it's a you know it's hard to get some of the synthetic data for some of the generative tool 100%, because it's very different, right? You're creating things, versus what we do. I kind of like to call it more observing nature, right? Like generating for asset generation, whether it's video or 3D asset, etc. You need to see these things, right, to understand. Like your model needs to see it. For kind of observing the nature is you're not creating art. You're more like trying to guess like movement, body movements, facial performance, camera movement, etc., which is mostly physics.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, because anyone who's ever done a match move, you're trying to track a surfboard or something. I just saw a tutorial about tracking a surfboard, and part of the process is okay, it tracked it perfectly, but it thinks it's the size of a cruise ship and really far away, and you need to tell it it's actually close to the camera. Yeah, because yeah, that's so funny. Okay, well, okay, so I'm getting a better picture of sort of how this all fits together, and really, it sounds like, I mean, I guess if we were talking in terms of who you're competing with, right, or what you're disrupting, it is traditional match moving tools and motion capture suits and all that kind of stuff. Now, initially, the Wonder Studio tool, when that's what it was called, it seemed like when I logged into the website and I looked at it, it was really meant for like not professional artists. It was meant for people that love to make stuff but they don't know how to like paint a clean plate. So this does it all for you, and you can make your own little movie, and it looks really, really, really like kind of astoundingly good. When it came out, I was totally blown away. But I've heard that there are actually like major films using this stuff. And I'm curious, I know you may not be able to like talk about the names and stuff, but I'm curious how they're using these tools. Are they just plugging into the pipeline? Before we get to that answer, let me tell you about School Motion All Access. All Access is a new program from us where you can take any of our classes that we offer anytime you want. You can learn After Effects, Cinema 4D, Photoshop, Illustrator, Rive, Unreal Engine, design, animation, visual effects, expressions, so much more. You can do it all with real human artists helping you along the way. Our one-of-a-kind training platform enables you to go through training at your own pace, but to also get personalized, tactical feedback on every single project you upload from one of our amazing teaching assistants. You'll also get to join our 24/7 hyper-engaged worldwide community of artists who are all on the same learning journey as you. You get exclusive access to live events, guest speakers, and portfolio reviews. You can earn verified credentials from us if you complete a course, and our credentials actually mean something because you've done work. Plus, we're one of the only online schools on earth to be both Adobe and Maxon certified. And if you're part of a team of 3 or more, you can join our team training program for All Access, giving you dashboards to track your team's progress, floating seats, consolidated billing, priority support, and more. So reach out on our team training page to get more information about that, and make sure you check out School Motion All Access. We are incredibly proud of it, and we hope to see you in class.
I was always excited making a tool for people, like, being nostalgic when you're a kid. And I mentioned like Video Copilot, like because of these certain tutorials and tools existed, I was able to do things as a kid that I couldn't do, right? And that was, to me, like that got me to fall in love with filmmaking. So we purposely built it. Okay, I have my easy 3 steps, which is upload my video, select my actor and my CG character, and then export the video, right? And I'm gonna get instead of me as an actor, or I'm gonna get that CG character in my video, right? Liked and animated and composed. I always say, kind of non-professionals, they will just use that video. But that video, I call post-viz at best, because it's not perfect. It's not gonna give you a perfect clean plate. It's not gonna give you perfect lighting. It's not gonna give you perfect animation. So that's when we really enable these elements for you to download all the data and get it into your software. So what we are seeing is we have the multiple tiers, kind of light tier, pro tier, and enterprise tier. Light tier are mostly users that will do it for social media, and they don't care that much if it doesn't look perfect, because turnaround time is much quicker, and they're doing it. A lot of them are doing it for fun. A lot of them doing it,
It still looks pretty damn good too.
Yeah, well, it still looks good.
Yeah.
But most of our professional enterprise users, they don't. The video is just post-viz for them to see what didn't work. So when they download the data, they can actually go and clean it up and then render it out of that software like Maya or Unreal or Blender. So for us, we have big studios using it. We have big production using it. Advertising agencies, some big marketing campaigns. When we first started, we did this project with the Russo brothers, a big film, and that's really, it helped us. We brought in artists, very professional artists, that worked on some major films, from Ready Player One to Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, and other films like that. And we asked them, okay, you tell us, because we have 25 models that are estimating everything down to knowing what camera frame it is and knowing what's going on in the shot. Are they walking, talking? We're using some elements to analyze, like to understand better what's going on in the shot. So we told them, we can give you a lot of data, but you tell us what data you need to plug in so you can get to your final shot based on this. And that's kind of how we, confirm that theory of like, okay, we want to plug it into the pipeline. So most of the professionals are really using it to get these elements out and get that 3D scene, and then add that, they add the clean plate that was produced. They have the lighting animation, then they'll go, animator is going to clean up the animation, compositor is going to clean up the clean plate, the lighting artist will go and fix the lighting and compositing, and then they're ready to push it to the final render. So it really just gets you quicker to that step versus you have to build that all from scratch.
Got it. Okay, so yeah, help me understand how it's faster, because I mean, it seems like, you even said in the beginning, the cost is really the time. And so what is happening more quickly on these productions that are using it?
Yeah, I mean, we have studies done. Boxel is one of the studios that use it for Superman and Louis, the TV show,
Okay.
and they cut down weeks to days. They told us, I forgot
Wow.
exactly yeah, but they've done something that's 3-4 weeks down to 3-4 days on certain steps. Majority on mockup for them was big one. So they sped up their animation because they had artists literally like film themselves in a room doing certain animation, and then they could put that in the shot. So it really accelerates the lack of stuff you need on set for hardware obviously is going to speed it up, but it accelerates the process because you're processing you can do multi-cut sequence. Let's say it takes you an hour to run 2 or 3 minute multi-cut sequence, and that gets you about 60% there. Sometimes if you do that from scratch, it will take you about 2-3 weeks to do. So you really do cut weeks down.
Right. So you're getting essentially, out of one tool, you're getting the camera match move, you're getting mocap, you're getting a lighting estimation that then you can tweak.
Yeah.
And is it also, and it's sending us, and it's presenting a scene you can open in Maya, and it's all kind of all set up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You get individual passes, but you also get right now we're giving Maya, Blender, Unreal, but then we also give USD export, so you can do USD and you can get it in other tools like 3ds Max and other tools.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm going to ask you this question, Nico, and we can cut this out if you don't want to answer it.
Okay.
So why is it? Because I mean, that sounds like an absolutely ridiculous amount of money saved. If you're taking something that used to take weeks and now it takes days, that actually does get you closer to that vision of, okay, like, you can raise money to shoot for a few days and do like a few days of post. And if you can get the result that would normally take, a couple of months, that's pretty amazing. Why are we not hearing about this more? Our studios, are people still a little shy to like admit that I'm using a tool that has AI in it? Like, is that still a thing?
I can't, obviously we have heavy NDAs, but so I can't speak about it in from like a Flow Studio perspective. But in general, yes. In general, I think that's the thing you mentioned about education. It's very hard for someone to, understand the difference between Gen AI and between what we do. And so then you have this fear, oh, wait, if I upload my IP, does that mean you're going to train on that data and you can recreate my Mickey Mouse? And that's the thing that we always that we always tell people, no, we're not. We're observing what's going on in the shot. We're not recreating your assets.
Right.
We're giving you data for your VFX artist to work quicker, right? But how do you explain that to someone who doesn't know anything about visual effects, right? So that's why we see a lot of productions just stay away from mentioning anything about AI because they know they're going to get a backlash of it. And it makes sense because everybody's grouping every tool in the same category, which is not. AI is a big category, and we've been using AI in visual effects for 20 years now. And it's just, unfortunately, there's this clickbaits right now that, people are going to read something that's negative way quicker than positive. So if you can, portray someone, unfortunately, in a bad light, you will, and people are not going to take their time to educate. So AI in general is being used way more than people realize in the industry. It's just that it's very risky to go out there and openly talk about it because people still don't understand. But I think that's what every big technology change. We've seen it back in early animation days, right? With 3D animation came out, a lot of people didn't like it.
Yeah.
Digital cameras came out, a lot of people hated it. All the cinematographers swore they'll never use a digital camera.
That, yeah.
right? So we've seen it in our industry, kind of like, like we're in an industry that survives. It's the industry that was meant to die, 50 times over and over, and theater is meant to die 50 times over and over. But I think we're such suckers for storytelling, and it's a resilient industry. But I think the pricing of production needs to go down. It became way too expensive. Like Ty and I were walking in San Francisco, a couple months ago, and we were joking. We were like looking at the buildings. I'm like, what do you think? How much this building cost? And then we looked it up, and it's like, I don't know, $20 million. And then
Yeah.
we were both laughing how like that, like you for one movie, you get 10 buildings that you can make, right?
Yeah.
And so it's such an absurd amount of money that takes to make a film, right?
Yeah.
So I do think technology here is meant to just basically help that and cut it down, so we can really and if you think about it, the cheaper it is, the more we can push storytelling, and that's why TV is so good right now, because you can risk more, you can tell more artistic stories without worrying that you have to get all your money back that one weekend in the box office. So, but if we bring the cost down, we're gonna just enable more people, more voices to be heard. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder what it's going to take for people to finally accept it and be able to talk openly about, come out of the AI closet, so to speak.
Time, yeah,
Yeah.
time. I think it will happen with time. It's like with every big technological shift. Uh, um, you'll see some kind of, usually with the way I see it, it goes like this. It's usually advertising and then music videos. And that's what's happening right now. Advertising, they're open about it. Like
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, Pepsi, you see it. They're just like, no, we don't care. We're spending so much time. We're going to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then it follows with the kind of like smaller productions, bigger productions go out openly, and then big, because studios unfortunately have the most amount of risk. They'll get scrutinized the most. Nobody's going to scrutinize a YouTuber if they use AI as much as studio when they have a $200 million movie, right? So I understand it. Like, I understand why it's hard, a hard space right now. But I think there are studios out there that are very artist friendly, and they're saying whatever our artists want to use. That's our philosophy. Like, whatever our artists want to use, that's what we believe in, and that to me is cool, right? It's like, you're like, okay, put it in the hands of artists, let them decide.
Yeah. So I want to hear a little bit about sort of the future of Flow Studio and what you're working on. So, I think I've got a pretty good idea now of like what the tool set lets you do and how it fits in. Where do you want to see it go? Like how far, do you want it to go even further into the process, or you start even earlier? Kind of where do you see, like in 5 years or 10 years even, what is it able to do?
Yeah, we have quite a bit of bottlenecks right now that we know that certain people cannot do unless they're really skilled in those steps, right? So I do think eventually we do want to bring it that we're independent of the DCC tools. Eventually, we want to bring it that you can edit every single elements yourself on a web browser. So that's really where we want to take it. The long-term vision has always been on how do I make these kind of things that AI video is trying to do, but do it really with full editability, do it with full control. So we really want to build that kind of DCC of the future, if you will, that you can just control every element of it, and you don't have to have that specific of a skill to do it. Like, you don't have to have 10 years of learning curve to do it, because that's a problem with a lot of tools. They really takes years to learn. I mean, probably going from After Effects to Nuke wasn't easy,
Correct.
but if you go from Nuke to Unreal, that's really hard.
Yeah.
All right. If you go from one to another, it's hard. These softwares, it's they're very complex for a reason, because we have to do so many things. But it's also very, very hard. If you think about, if you look at the iPhone or a product like that, it's really successful. If you try to sell a product right now, and say, hey, you would need like 2 years to learn how to use this and be good at it, you'll be like, what? No, I'm not doing that, right? On the side. So I think that's what people are excited about AI. Is just it's much quicker and more intuitive process, and a much lower learning curve.
Yeah. So is the idea that you can abstract away more and more of, like we were just talking about this new tool that helps you retopologize 3D models. And I mean, that's kind of its own specialty, right? And most 3D artists I talk to, they would love it if like they never had to create a UV map ever again.
Right, right.
So is it like really technical stuff like that, or are you even thinking further? Like, we'd love to give you, a pretty good 3D model of the thing you shot on set that has a rig built into it. Like, how kind of, I guess, talk me through like, what the dream is.
Yeah, without going too like specific, because obviously some of the things we're still building.
Yeah.
It's more we're gonna do it in a standard as long as the standard is there. But I want to push the new standards also, right? If that makes sense, because certain things, certain elements we do in 3D are there because of the limitations of the software they were building. As you say, UV maps, etc. But we might not have it. We might not need them. Like if you look at neural rendering, it's a very different approach, and it works really well. Right? We've been seeing a lot of companies, a lot of solutions, kind of in that 3D space where you're blocking out your scene, then you put a layer of rendering. So for us, I would like to really cut down the number of these like super specialized steps that are very honestly boring to do and take the most time, right? A lot of artists just don't like a lot of these steps they have to do in their job. I was one of them. There's so many times I've done certain shots over and over again because I couldn't use certain assets that I've done with the other studio. And then you're like, this process is ridiculous. Like you're just, I'm doing something for 3 weeks that I've done over and over before. So that's where machine learning is good, like pattern recognition and speeding things up.
Yeah. So is the building that you have to do, because I know that, companies like yours, well, I don't know as much about yours, but, talking to the CEO of Moon Valley, he made me realize that there's kind of this relationship between the companies building products based on the work of these like AI research labs, right? And so, there's certain things that like they want to do where they kind of have to wait for the next breakthrough in GPU architecture, like to really get what they want, right? Are there things like that where you're kind of waiting around for the technology to catch up, or at this point, yeah, you can go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why that holistic approach is important. For us, it was that separation of elements, like that, kind of scene understanding, because some models, the research is just not there yet. But that's why we went with that holistic approach, and because I think if you make it easy to swap models and foundational models as they get better, it's going to be good. And we see it now. There's a company called Flora that basically just lets you kind of pick. They made a very cool canvas that you can go and do image, video, text, other things, but you can pick model. Like, do you want Sora on there? Do you want Google's model? Do you want Runway, etc. on it? So I think a lot of foundational models will become a commodity, which we've seen already happening. With DeepSeek and some other. It's that will happen. And the frustration I sometimes have with the research, not the frustration, but what we learn inside of Wonder is, we started early on, and when we were like encounter a big problem, we would see like, okay, can we like so-called throw money at it? Let's hire the best researcher we can, like 25, just like the best researcher you can find. And then I learned early on that a lot of researchers just, their goal is very different than what you're trying to do. Like, you're trying to build a product for an artist. They're trying to solve a research problem. Is it a math problem? Is it a physics problem? To get to a certain conference, right? It's and some of the research problems are not necessarily what we need, right? On the artist side, right? So it's very important to combine a good researcher with a good person in that field you're trying to build. So are you trying to build something for visual effects, or you need a CG artist, or do you need a computer graphics engineer to work together with them? But you also need that artist to be a part of it. That's why I think it's important to build these tools inside of our industry by people that come from the industry. Because then you understand, okay, this is what I'm building it for. Because research on its own, it's a bit of like, usually every 6 months we see some major breakthrough. But that major breakthrough is very, like, sometimes the demo is very selective of what the demo is, right? And then you've probably seen it. There's a lot of open source that, like, if you go back in time 2 years ago, you look at it and are like, oh my God, the future of filmmaking has been revolutionized. I don't know, maybe 200
every
times
week
in the
for the past 2 years. Yeah, exactly.
Every week, every week there's a time somewhere on LinkedIn like, oh, this changes everything.
Yeah,
and you're like, okay, yeah, great. Okay, I tested 2 shots, it worked, and then 30 shots didn't work. So we'll hold on that revolution a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, I've often described generative AI as a slot machine, because even a tool like, I use Pika sometimes because it's fun and you can make yourself into a marshmallow, and that's clever. But it's still by default it gives you 2 generations because it knows one of them is not going to be good. So and actually this brings up a question I wanted to ask you. There's kind of another thought I've heard out there. I don't know how feasible it really is, but using generative AI as a render engine, but there's like a 3D world driving it. And it sounds like you're doing the second part. You have a 3D world. You're rebuilding that. And I don't know if you can say, but I mean, you guys must be using a render engine to render out things for Flow Studio.
Yeah, we are, and we're obviously like letting people, depending on what DCC they want to use to do it. But it's funny you mentioned that kind of like 3D representation, neural array rendering. That's something we're building as well. Because I'm a big believer the kind of traditionally rendering will not necessarily remain, because it makes sense. The neural rendering is just much quicker, and it gives you a better look with less resources on the side. So I think that will change. That will drastically change. We do it on a standpoint of kind of providing people capability to go into that DCC. So for it to work, because you're uploading your asset that you build in that DCC, whether it's Blender, Maya, or others on the side. So that was a necessity for us as far as belonging to the pipeline or being a part of the pipeline. Yeah, and the slot machine, I agree. I think I do love what Pika people are doing, but they're openly focused on social media, which is great. Like I like when companies like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're focusing. Pika team is very smart. I've been really impressed with their research. They're pushing some great research, and as you say, it's fun. But yeah, a lot of the things for our use case, for like filmmaking, for pushing your shot, it's the slot machine still, because we don't have that editability element of it. And then as we mentioned earlier, like if you got a black box, that's a big issue. You can't do much with a black box in that aspect yet. But some of these problems will be solved. Most of these problems will be solved. It just take time.
Yeah, so you could see a future where like a filmmaker with a small budget is using your tools to rebuild the 3D world, but then they're rendering it with an AI that makes it look photoreal without having to do all of the technical things that you have to do to make it. It's
happening already. Yeah, we have some users already doing it on their own. They're kind of downloading elements from. Actually, we have users that are like using Sora, and then using Flow Studio to get 3D representation of what Sora created, so they can get animation, camera track, all that. Wow. Then they import that. Then they import that in a DCC. And then they add some nodes to it with kind of neural layer rendering. So we've seen people do that pipeline, which I think it's a great pipeline. We will enable this pipeline inside of Flow as well.
Yeah.
With kind of the 3D editor, you can go in and then add that layer of generative kind of rendering on top of it.
Wow. That's really fascinating. I mean, I don't know. I like all of it, to be honest. Like, I think a year ago, I was a little more hesitant to express any joy about this new technology just because of the backlash. But, and this kind of leads, I guess, into the last topic I wanted to get into with you, is that, there is still, I personally at this point, and there was actually a survey I just saw last week of the animation industry, and they asked everybody how many of you are using AI for any part of your process, and it's over 50%. But you certainly wouldn't get that impression if you get on LinkedIn or you get on social media, right? But a lot of people are using it. So it's a preference falsification thing going on right now, where a lot of people are using it, just not talking about it. And soon that'll go away. But that backlash was based on like a real and probably legitimate fear, right? If you're, the premier synthized match mover in Los Angeles, this stuff might make you worry a little bit, right? So I'm curious, and you mentioned like having sort of wanting to build your company in an ethical way and not try to replace the artist. But some things will be replaced. I'm just curious kind of how you think about that side of it and what that might look like in the future.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm not someone who's going to be like, yeah, we're not replacing anybody. That's all, nice and rose. I think these technological changes always do. I do think we're going to discover what is this new role that we will see, but certain specialized roles will have a hard time remaining, right, on the aspect. And that's going to be, it's not up to us, right? It's not like, we're one out of many. It's really going to see where the industry is going to go. How will this end up being, right? As you say, someone is doing mash move. I do think, or someone's doing a texture artist, etc. Like, I do think a good artist learns how to use some of these tools And because to me, a good artist is not someone who's like technically savvy with the software that they're
Agreed.
using.
Yeah.
A good artist to me is someone who has a good artistic eye to recognize when something is good enough to send for a review, or coming up with I mean, I met like post-biz and previous artists that designed some shots that you're like, wait, you did this? I thought that director did that. They're like, no, I designed the camera move in this, and you're
Yeah.
like, wow, that's fascinating, right? Because I didn't know that until I got deeper into the industry, like that there's a lot of artists that make certain decisions that you never knew this is their decision. You thought there's like one person at the top that makes all the decisions, right? Um, so that really, I think, to me, makes a good artist. The specification of the tool they use that they're good at, that's a means to an end. And I know this based on, like, we have engineers and we have CG artists, and when you have someone like a junior artist, a VFX artist, or a CG artist, whether it's a compositor, animator, etc., their eye is just not developed yet, their artistic eye, to understand what's good. Like, that's why you have a lot of these AI videos that I compare it to early days of VR. Remember early days of VR, we would see a lot of content and it just 360 video that looked like crap. And the content, it doesn't matter if you watch it on YouTube or in a big theater, it was a crappy story with poorly developed characters. You would hate it. And then people judge technology based on that content. But that content was made by engineers, not storytellers. There's a lot of startups that were making content for their headsets they were trying to sell. And then the content wasn't good. And so people like, this is crap. Why would I watch this, right? So they didn't understand that and so I think it's the same with artists now. Like, a good artist will find a way to kind of a good artist will be recognized for their artistic eye and for knowing what's good, what's creative, and how do you achieve it. That's why, same now with AI video, we see so many videos that are just kind of crappy because a lot of it is made by people that don't really understand the storytelling, kind of, and kind of certain rules and things you have to know in a storytelling language to make a good make a good film. So yeah, I think, by that being said, I understand it. I understand it really on the side of the irony. I always say is this: AI and robotics kind of have always been a promise of, humans are creative people, right? And so we're going to create these robots. This is past, if you read, anybody from Asimov to, books written 100 years ago that talk about robotics. We're all about, we're creative, but we spend so much of our jobs doing non-creative stuff. So we'll make these robots to do all this stuff that are not creative so we can focus on creative. And then
Yeah.
the first big revolution that showed up with AI is in the creative field, basically doing some of the stuff for the creative. So I
Yeah.
get the irony. And I understand why. Obviously it's a scary time. My advice to every artist would be just like, don't fight it. The change is going to happen. Just learn the tools. Learn the tools, because people will hire you because of your artistic eye and your artistic knowledge and your knowledge in the space of what's good art, what's a good camera move, what's good, what is a good character look, what's a good shot compositing, right? That's what you get hired for. Not because you necessarily know this tool better than someone else knows this tool, right? So I think you still need to kind of, take it is going to help you get faster. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, and this leads to my last question. And we asked our students, like, if they had any questions, they would ask you, and a bunch of people had like a similar question. So this is from Joe Walker and Cody Nitcher, and I guess I'm kind of asking you to like go a little bit outside of the VFX world a little bit for this, because most of our students are motion designers doing more, of course, kind of abstract animation. But I think there's definitely like a straight line to the visual effects world too, where the fear that I think you've already kind of done a good job of kind of dispelling, right? At least for the near term. The fear is that, a brand can go to an AI and say, I need a cool visual metaphor for this, like, security product I sell with shapes moving around, and I need some good music and a voiceover, and it needs to be compelling and tell my story and have a call to action. And they'll hit enter and they'll wait 5 minutes and there it is. And, I've heard, interviews with Sam Altman and stuff like that, where you might get the impression that that's coming down the road. But you've kind of made the point that, like, well, people who say that typically have no idea how many steps are involved and how many decisions actually get made and how those decisions get made. Is that even, like, because you know a lot more about AI than I do, is that even conceptually possible? Is that something we should actually be worried about?
Yeah, it's conceptually possible. My philosophy behind it is this: First, is it going to be good enough with one iteration? No, you're going to iterate a lot of it. You're going to have to learn how to communicate what exactly you want to place in it. But here's my philosophy around it. Okay, so we are making an assumption. Let's say technology gets there. One button, you get all of it. It's perfect. People know when something is low effort. We naturally, as human beings, do not like to give a lot of credit that we know something is just a click of a button. That's why we also like art, because we know it's hard. So we're making assumption that when tools get there, that we're just going to stop pushing the ceiling. I always tell people, no, we're going to push the ceiling more. Just like indie films and studios, indie filmmakers make a certain film, studios push it higher visually because they can, because they have the budgets for it, right? Just because when this becomes easier and cheaper doesn't mean we're just going to stop and satisfy ourselves there. No, we're going to try to push it more. So whatever limitation of software is, we're gonna need these people to push it more, and that's going to be artists. It's just we don't know yet what that is higher ceiling, because we can't imagine it and picture it, because it's still hard to make these things. That's my philosophy behind it. I don't know if that makes sense on what I'm trying to say, but I think that's what we're worried about. We're worried about it's like okay, you have an ad today. This is an ad we made. So someone's going to make a tool. It's going to be like 3 clicks to make this app. I'm not a big believer it's going to end up like that simple. But let's say there's a scenario this happens. But that ad is something that works today as a final product. When these tools come to that point, that ad is no longer going to be appreciated. We're not going to be like, we're going to think like, oh, this is BS. This is cheap. Someone made it in 5 minutes. I'm not. What a lazy company, right? What a lazy company they did that. So I think for us as humans, we want to know that whatever artistic we're watching, that someone actually put a lot of effort in it, and it was hard to do. That's why we like art. That's why we like everything. We today like everything that you will willing to spend money or put your time into is because you know someone put a time in. That's why I think also the frustration with AI sometimes is misunderstanding what it is. People think it's like 2-click solution. We had the same with Flow Studio. People are like, oh, 3-click solution. We're like, no, 3 clicks give you a post viz, and then you go and you get a lot more clicks to get to the final shot.
Right.
So that's why I think like subconsciously that will not change. Biologically, we're wired like that. It's not going to change. We're just going to push art further. We just cannot picture yet what that art is. Like just like someone 100 years ago, you show him a TV show that came out a week ago. They were like, what? They would just be mind blown seeing some visual effects in CG. They wouldn't understand it. They were like, how is this even possible? Right? So we don't know what that is. We don't know what that future is, but we're moving towards that future. So, sorry, I get very passionate about this one,
Dude,
but I
I
hope it
love
makes
that
sense.
answer.
Yeah.
No, I've actually never heard that answer, and it made me think of one more question. So, and this is kind of a philosophical one, so hopefully you'll go there with me. So,
always.
So I have this. You know, like I love learning about AI, especially how it relates to my industry, but I just love learning about it in general. And one of the things that I really disagree with is the idea that like it's conscious, right? Like and one of the things and how that kind of ties into what we're talking about is if you're doing Iron Man and the director says we need some design for when he's looking at his heads up display. We need to see his face and someone has to like have that vision go into their mind somehow, and then they turn it into pixels. But where did that idea come from? And that's the part that I'm really skeptical AI is ever going to be better than a human at. Like, once you have that idea, how do I do it? AI is going to be amazing at that, right? It's going to tell you exactly how, or it's just going to do it. But I'm curious what you think, like in the visual effects world, every superhero movie has some new laser effect you've never seen before, or the teleportation effect uses some cool new thing. Is it possible that AI can come up with those ideas? Because I guess that's kind of like, in the end, if there was something I was worried about, it'd be that like AI is actually good at creativity,
creating ideas,
however you define it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think, like there's this belief of everything is a remix. I don't know if you ever seen these videos, like it's called Everything's a Remix. I say like, I'm a huge, my name is Nikola, so biased. I'm a huge fan of Nikola Tesla, growing up reading about him, studying him, etc. And he talked about how like, we're like computers, that we're input and an output. Inputs are our senses, like eyes, ears, etc. That's how we, get our input, and that causes a certain output. That's what builds us as a our characteristic as a human being comes from a lifetime of input, whether it's negative, positive, etc. Right? This is kind of like basic. That's why it's called neural. When we talk about AI, is because we're trying to imitate our brain. We're trying to kind of like logically build these models like how our brain functions.
Yeah.
And I understand that fear. I don't think that it's going to come to a point that's just coming up with better ideas, because okay, if anybody can come up with can ask the same prompt and same question and you're going to get the same ideas, are those ideas novel now? To me, it's more like, what do you build on top of what they give you? Because we subconsciously form ideas based on what we've seen. Like, we don't even realize sometimes, like, let's say you're coming up with a script, you're gonna come up with a script that you're like, this is so original, but you don't realize what caused that idea. It's a combo of something you experienced. It's a combo of something you've seen in other films. It's a combo of something you heard in podcasts or something. You don't even know. You can't go far back enough to get what click. Someone told you something.
Right.
You combine certain things. Yeah. So it is a combination of the things. So to me, it's like, okay, great. Maybe AI will come up with some great ideas, but what you put on top of that is really what will make that artistic choice, will make it novel. Like I'm not a fan of like future where AI is producing the whole film, the actors are sitting home licensing their likeness. Then it's not art. Like, then, like, what's the point, right? For gaming, sure, yes. If you're going out and playing a game and you want that kind of like open world that's completely open, that you can go explore everywhere. Let's say you're in your VR headset, you want to have conversation with a bunch of NPCs. Great, yeah, I get that, right? That's a different use case. But for me, for an art piece that someone asks you, hey, take 2 hours of your life and here's the story I made. Like, if that story is AI generated, I'm not a fan of it. Like, I don't know. I don't love the future where I had this conversation recently about like, do you think we're gonna watch movies with synthetic actors? Like, that's what AI video is right now. I'm like, I don't like that future. I like to watch certain actors because I really admire their craft, and I also kind of follow that actor outside of these films because they're good people, right? I like their philosophy. I like their point of view, right? Like, they say separate their art from the artist, but I'm like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to separate. Yeah. On the side. So I don't know. To me, I hope we don't end up in that future.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss any of the amazing upcoming guests we have on the School of Motion podcast or any of the other awesome content we have. Everything we talked about will be in the show notes, and I hope to see you next time.